You think you understand women? Good. Because what you're about to hear will flip everything upside down. You were raised on a message that sounded noble, comforting, harmless. Be soft. Be open. Be vulnerable. Be her protector, her provider, her peace. They told you that women want a good man, someone who listens, who feels deeply, who gives endlessly. And maybe you tried that. Maybe you lived it. But then reality hit you in the gut. Because somewhere along the way, you noticed something that didn't match the script. You watched the same woman who once held onto every word you said, suddenly lose interest. You watched her give her attention to someone who didn't chase, didn't over-explain, didn't drown her in effort. And you found yourself thinking, why does everything I was taught feel like it doesn't work? That quiet sting in your chest, that voice telling you something is off, that's not bitterness. That's awareness. That's the recognition that you were trained for a version of relationships that doesn't match the real world. But here's the thing. This isn't about blaming women. It's about waking up to the dynamics of attraction, confidence, and self-worth that nobody ever bothered to teach you. Most men grow up being told, implicitly or directly, that the way to earn love is through effort, through proving yourself, through endless availability, through self-sacrifice disguised as romance. But relationships don't thrive on one-sided giving. They thrive on balance, on two people drawn together, not one person chasing while the other drifts. You were never supposed to lose yourself just to be chosen. You were supposed to understand your own value first, because here's a truth most men never hear. Attraction isn't built on desperately trying to be good enough. It's built on presence, confidence, and direction. Not dominance. Not manipulation. Not emotional games. Just grounded, self-led strength. Women are drawn to men who vanish into people-pleasing. They're drawn to men who have a center, men who know who they are, what they're building, and where they're going. Not men who hand over their identity the moment someone gives them attention. And no, that doesn't mean being cold or detached. It means being anchored. It means you don't crumble the second someone pulls away. It means your life has weight beyond her validation. Many men confuse vulnerability with boundary-less transparency. They think that pouring out every insecurity early on creates closeness. But real closeness comes from trust, not oversharing. From consistency, not confession marathons. And women, like men, instinctively respond to people who have depth, not desperation. Here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes, the very things you do to gain her affection are the things that dissolve her attraction. Not because she's cruel, not because she wants to hurt you, but because human psychology is wired to respond to confidence, not neediness. When your energy says, I need you to validate me, you stop being a partner and start being an emotional project. And no person, man or woman, wants to carry the burden of someone else's self-worth. What you call romantic effort, she may experience as emotional pressure. What you call showing how much you care, she may see as trying too hard to be chosen. Again, not because you meant anything wrong, but because you were never taught how attraction actually works. You were taught to chase, when real connection comes from mutual pull, not pursuit. You were taught to prioritize her feelings, and forgot to protect your own emotional boundaries. You were taught to worship her beauty, and forgot to cultivate your own purpose. And that purpose, your mission, your vision, your growth, is the real gravitational force in your life. It's what creates authenticity, confidence, direction. It's what gives you a life someone wants to join, not consume. Attraction grows when there is space for curiosity. Room for someone to wonder who you are, what you're building, and why you move the way you do. Not because you're mysterious, but because you're grounded, because your identity isn't dependent on her. Most men lose themselves the moment they feel affection from someone attractive. They rearrange their entire schedule. They soften every boundary. They make her the center of their world before she's even earned that position. But doing that doesn't communicate love. It communicates scarcity. It says, I value you more than I value myself. And when you give someone total access before they've invested anything, you unintentionally teach them that your time, energy, and emotional labor require no effort to receive. Not because they're bad, but because you train them to expect it. Relationships thrive when both people bring value, not when one person gives everything up front hoping to be chosen. And what creates value in a man's life isn't how hard he chases. It's the life he builds, the standards he sets, the boundaries he protects. A grounded man doesn't lead with, please pick me. He leads with purpose, direction, clarity, not through force, but through consistency and self-respect. A man like that doesn't fear silence. He doesn't panic when someone pulls away. He doesn't collapse at the first sign of emotional turbulence. Because he knows his worth doesn't depend on external attention. He knows connection is mutual, not earned through overgiving. And women, like men, respond deeply to that kind of presence. Not because it's manipulative, but because it feels safe. It feels steady. It feels like someone who won't disappear into insecurity or collapse under pressure. Attraction isn't a game of who can control who. It's a dance between two energies, two people who respect themselves enough to show up whole. But if you've been hurt before, if you've been ignored, ghosted, or taken for granted, it's easy to fall into the belief that you need to try harder, give more, explain yourself endlessly. You don't. You need to rebuild your center. You need to cultivate a life that fulfills you regardless of who stays or leaves. Because here's the reality. You were never meant to make someone the sun of your universe. You were meant to be the sky, vast, grounded, full of purpose and identity that doesn't shatter when one person steps out of your life. And when you become that man, not cold, not arrogant, but self-led, you stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop contorting yourself to fit someone's expectations. You move from a place of abundance instead of scarcity. You choose from strength instead of need. And ironically, that's when people start to notice you. Because you stop needing them to. But let's go deeper, into the part most men try to avoid. Into the part that stings a little. Because the truth is this, the biggest reason you've been hurt by women is because you made them the center of your emotional universe before you ever became the center of your own. You gave them power they never asked for. You demanded they carry responsibility they never agreed to. You turned your desire into dependence and your affection into obligation. And when someone becomes obligated to care for you, the attraction dies. Fast. People don't crave what demands from them. They crave what inspires them, what challenges them, what stands tall whether they stay or leave. You weren't taught that. You were taught to behave your way into being loved, to overgive until someone finally acknowledged your effort, to earn romance like it was a reward for being a good man. But attraction doesn't care how good you are. It cares how grounded you are, how in control you are, how centered you remain when emotions swirl. And yes, women test. Not because they're trying to break you. Not because they enjoy making you insecure. Not because they're manipulative masterminds. They test because instinct pushes them to verify strength. The same way men instinctively verify loyalty, values, stability. These aren't games. They're survival patterns wired into biology. When she pulls back a little, she's not always trying to reject you. She's checking something. She's feeling for the depth of your presence. She's seeing if your confidence is real or just performance. And that's where many men crumble. Because instead of holding your ground, you panic. You rush in. You overtext. You overexplain. You try to repair a connection that wasn't even broken. It was simply being measured. Every time you fold, every time you apologize for things you didn't do, Every time you try to appease her emotions instead of anchoring them, you don't calm the storm. You become part of it. And nobody feels attracted to chaos that comes from insecurity. Here's the part that hits the hardest. When she realizes she can emotionally control you, she loses the ability to desire you. Not because she's unkind, but because desire requires polarity. Someone to hold. Someone to be held. Someone who leads with intention. Someone who follows with trust. When you give up your direction for her approval, you're not becoming a supportive partner. You're abandoning your masculine center. And once that center collapses, you can't be her anchor anymore. You become another weight she has to carry. That's how resentment grows. That's how attraction crumbles. That's how relationships die long before they actually end. You think your softness is the problem. It's not. Your softness is beautiful when it sits on top of strength. But when softness replaces strength, you don't become vulnerable. You become unstable. And instability kills romance. What she actually wants, what she feels, even if she never says it out loud, is this: a man who is emotionally aware, but not emotionally dependent. A man who listens, but doesn't lose his voice. A man who can be tender, but doesn't collapse into neediness. She wants someone who can handle her emotions without becoming consumed by them. Someone who can hold space without losing his boundaries. Someone who can love deeply without surrendering his identity in the process. Because feminine energy doesn't want to lead. It wants to trust. But it can't trust a man who has no spine. It can't relax into a relationship where the man keeps shrinking to avoid conflict. It can't surrender to someone who is waiting to be told who to be. You were trained to avoid conflict, to smooth things over, to shrink so no one feels uncomfortable. But that makes you forgettable, replaceable, a background character in your own life. And that's why you end up feeling used, ignored, taken for granted. Not because you're unlovable, but because you're not showing anything worth attaching to. People don't fall for men who are emotionally spineless. They fall for men who have a code. Standards, direction, gravity. You want to be desired? Then stop offering your soul at a discount. You want to be respected? Then stop bending every time someone raises an eyebrow. You want to be unforgettable? Then stop apologizing for existing. Here's the shift. Stop trying to win her over. Start becoming someone she naturally gravitates toward. Not through games. Not through manipulation. Through gravity. Through direction. Through self-respect that radiates without you announcing it. A man who's building a life. A real one, with mission and momentum. Is magnetic in ways no compliments can imitate. A man with boundaries. Clear, calm, unshakable. Is more attractive than the nicest guy in the world. A man who can walk away when something violates his standards. Is far more powerful than the man who stays hoping things will magically fix themselves. Because when a man doesn't need to be chosen, he becomes someone worth choosing. Your power isn't in chasing. Your power isn't in pleasing. Your power isn't in pouring out your emotions hoping someone will pick up the pieces. Your power is in becoming a man whose presence speaks louder than his insecurity. A man who chooses love, but doesn't collapse into it. A man who desires connection, but doesn't use it to fill a void. A man who gives, but never at the cost of his own backbone. Because the moment you make a woman responsible for your identity, you cease being a partner and become a dependent. That's why losing her feels like losing yourself. Because you never had a self in the first place. You made her your entire meaning. That ends now. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in awakening. You don't heal by hating women. You don't grow by blaming them. You evolve by realizing this. She was never supposed to complete you. She was supposed to complement you. But you have to be complete first. This isn't about becoming cold, or detached, or emotionless. It's about becoming grounded, clear, solid. A man who leads his emotions instead of drowning in them. When you rebuild your center. When your validation comes from your mission, your growth, your discipline. You stop needing relationships to make you feel whole. And ironically, that's when people start to see your value. Because you stopped asking for it. So here's your call. Stop molding yourself into the man you think she wants. Become the man you were supposed to be. A man with purpose. A man with standards. A man with gravity. Build yourself until your presence commands attention. Without a single word spoken. Walk like a man who doesn't chase. Speak like a man who doesn't fear silence. Love like a man who doesn't beg. Live like a man who chooses. Never one who pleads. That's when attraction becomes effortless. That's when respect becomes natural. That's when you stop being forgettable and start being unforgettable. And that is how you win.